At a family party, I was forced into signing a divorce paper. My name is Emily Carter, and for nearly 10 years I thought I had built a life with Michael, my husband. We weren't perfect, but I believed in us. That evening, we arrived at his father's 65th birthday celebration, and something in the air felt different. I smiled politely, tried to settle into the warmth of family chatter, but I couldn't shake the strange chill in the way his relatives looked at me. It wasn't my imagination. There was a stiffness, a quiet avoidance that made my stomach twist. Michael's younger brother, Ryan, seemed almost entertained by it. He smirked when our eyes met, leaning close to Michael and whispering something that made them both chuckle. I brushed it off, telling myself not to be paranoid, but the unease clung to me all evening. I felt like I was being watched, like I was an outsider in a place where I had once been welcomed. As the night wore on, I noticed Michael becoming more distant, barely speaking to me unless it was in front of others. I tried to focus on his father, on celebrating the milestone, but even then I couldn't ignore how unnatural everything felt. Toward the end of the party, just when I thought we would finally be heading home, Michael asked me to follow him into the study. Ryan trailed behind, his smug grin sharper than ever. When I stepped into the room, my world tilted. A stack of papers sat neatly on the desk, and Michael slid them toward me with a coldness I had never seen in his eyes before. "Just sign it, Emily," he said flatly, like it was nothing more than a casual agreement. "It'll be easier this way." My heart dropped as I read the word, divorce. I froze, trying to make sense of what was happening. My voice shook when I asked why, but neither of them offered an explanation. Ryan only leaned back, arms crossed, clearly enjoying my confusion. The weight of the entire family just a few feet away pressed down on me. What would they say if I refused? What scene would it cause? My hands trembled as I realized how cornered I was. With humiliation burning through me, I picked up the pen. Tears blurred the words on the page as I signed my name. In that moment, surrounded by betrayal, I felt everything I thought I knew about my marriage collapse. They had planned this, and I had walked right into their trap. I left the party without saying a word, my legs weak as if they might give out beneath me. I kept my face straight until I was outside, refusing to let anyone see me fall apart. But once I reached my car, my hands shook so badly I could hardly fit the key in the ignition. The drive home was a haze, headlights blurring as I tried to believe there was some mistake, that maybe I had misunderstood what just happened. When I opened the front door, the truth slammed into me. The house was gutted. Drawers emptied, closets half bare, shelves missing his belongings. Even our photo frames were gone, leaving pale outlines on the walls where they used to hang. Michael hadn't just blindsided me at the party. He had already moved out. Every corner of the house screamed of planning, of deliberate deceit. I knew instantly he hadn't done it alone. Ryan's smug expression at the party came rushing back to me, and it all clicked. He had helped. He must have carried boxes, loaded trucks, erased every trace of the life I thought I still had. The betrayal wasn't just from my husband. It came from his own brother, a man I once trusted. The more I thought about the past months, the more the pieces fit together. The late nights at work, the quick silences when I walked into the room, the way he still smiled in front of friends as if nothing was wrong. He had been staging my downfall step by step while lying to my face. I confronted him later, my voice trembling but steady enough to demand the truth. He didn't even bother to look guilty. He met my eyes and said without hesitation, "I've been seeing someone else. Her name is Claire. I want to marry her." It felt like my chest had caved in, but before I could speak, Ryan added his poison. With that same smirk I had seen too many times, he leaned in and said, "You should have seen this coming. You were just a placeholder." In that moment I understood. I hadn't just lost a marriage. I had been erased, replaced, and laughed at while it all unfolded right in front of me. I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. The silence of the house made it worse, every corner reminding me of what had been stripped away. It wasn't just Michael who had betrayed me. It was the entire family that stood by while I was cornered. Their cold stares at the party hadn't been ignorance. They had known. That realization sank into me like lead, leaving me feeling abandoned on every side. Nights became the hardest. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, hearing his voice in my mind. All those times I had asked why he was coming home late, why he smelled faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, why his phone never left his hand. He always had answers ready. "You're overthinking," he'd say. "Stop imagining things." I had believed him, doubted myself, told myself I was being paranoid. Now, every memory of those conversations burned with shame. Rachel tried to be there for me, calling every day, dropping by with food, forcing me to get out of bed when all I wanted was to hide. She kept saying none of this was my fault, that I deserved better, but guilt clung to me anyway. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed, that maybe I should have seen the signs earlier. Every time I looked in the mirror, all I saw was someone too blind to protect herself. The moment that haunted me most was in the study, my hand trembling as I signed my name. I should have refused. I should have demanded time, demanded counsel, demanded anything other than surrender. But I hadn't, and now those papers mocked me. I had given them exactly what they wanted. My silence, my compliance, my name at the bottom of a page that erased 10 years of my life. But underneath the grief, something else began to stir. It was faint at first, just a whisper inside me when I caught my reflection or when Rachel squeezed my hand and told me I wasn't broken. The whisper grew louder each day until I finally said it out loud, even if only to myself. If he thinks he's done with me that easily, he's wrong. That single thought became my anchor. I didn't know how yet, but I refused to let this betrayal be the final chapter of my story. I forced myself to push past the fog and start looking for answers. Grief wasn't going to give me clarity, but digging might. I began with the paperwork at home. Bank statements, old emails, anything I could get my hands on. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that Michael's betrayal went far deeper than walking away. Hidden transfers appeared in our accounts. Large sums quietly funneled out months before that night. Tracing the trail made my stomach knot tighter with each document. The destination wasn't random. It led straight to Ryan. My own brother-in-law had been sitting on the pieces of my life, holding what rightfully belonged to me. It wasn't neglect or oversight. It was intentional, methodical, and designed to leave me with nothing. As if that wasn't enough, another discovery hit me like a slap. In his name was a property I had never heard about, tucked neatly away, a condo furnished and occupied. It didn't take long to learn who was living there. Claire. She wasn't just a sudden fling. She had been comfortably set up in a home I hadn't even known existed, all while I went about my days thinking my marriage still stood. The depth of the deception made my chest ache. The timing finally clicked in my mind. That paper shoved across the desk wasn't some impulsive decision. It had been calculated. They waited until I was surrounded, until I couldn't fight back, until the weight of family eyes pressed me into silence. They wanted to strip me of dignity along with my marriage, to trap me into agreeing under pressure. The humiliation burned. I thought of myself in that study, pen in hand, believing I had no choice. I felt like a fool, like I had been played in a performance everyone else had rehearsed. But mixed with the sting was something sharper, something that kept me from crumbling completely. For the first time I wasn't just broken, I was furious. Used, cornered, humiliated, yes, but not finished. If Michael believed he had erased me, he had miscalculated. That night at the party wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my determination to strike back. I knew I couldn't keep drowning in anger without direction, so I made an appointment with an attorney. Walking into that office felt heavy, like I was admitting to a stranger just how much of a mess my life had become. Daniel Hayes greeted me with calm assurance, the kind that made me feel like maybe I wasn't completely powerless. I laid out the nightmare, from the ambush at the party to the shocking discoveries afterward. His expression tightened the more I spoke, but he didn't interrupt until I was done. Then he leaned forward, steady and deliberate, and explained that what had happened wasn't as final as Michael wanted me to believe. The signature on those papers, he said, might not hold the weight Michael was counting on. I hadn't had an attorney present, I had been backed into a corner in a family setting, and I had signed under emotional distress. Those conditions, he told me, could render the agreement meaningless in court. The fact that assets had been moved behind my back only strengthened my position. I felt my chest rise with something I hadn't felt in weeks: relief. Daniel's voice carried conviction as he reminded me that betrayal and manipulation didn't erase my rights. "This isn't over, Emily," he said firmly. "They wanted to play dirty, but you can fight back." Hearing those words was like someone pulling me out of deep water after I'd been thrashing too long to breathe. For the first time since everything collapsed, the despair that had pinned me down started to loosen. Hope wasn't rushing in all at once, but it was there. A flicker, a spark I hadn't thought I would feel again. I walked out of his office lighter than when I walked in, with the smallest but most important thought pressing at the back of my mind. Maybe I wasn't powerless after all. Once I walked out of Daniel's office, I knew my next step had to be deliberate. Hope meant nothing without action, so I started piecing together everything I could. I dug through emails, text records, and receipts, tracing back the moments Michael thought he had hidden. The late-night messages, the weekend trips disguised as work. Every small lie lined up into a clear picture of just how long he had been unfaithful. The affair wasn't a sudden mistake. It was a carefully maintained double life. Next, I focused on the money. Quiet nights at my desk turned into hours of combing through statements and transactions. The trail of funds moving into Ryan's accounts was undeniable, a paper chain that revealed how deep their scheme ran. Each highlighted line fueled me, proof that I wasn't crazy, proof that their betrayal was systematic and cruel. The condo surfaced next. Hidden behind documents I almost overlooked. Seeing Claire's name tied to the property Michael had purchased in secret made my stomach churn. She hadn't just appeared. She had been set up comfortably while I was left clueless. Every detail I uncovered turned the humiliation into resolve. But gathering evidence wasn't enough. I needed strength outside my own, so I reached out to people who had once worked with Michael. Some had lost money, others had lost trust, but all of them carried resentment toward him. Slowly, I found myself surrounded by voices that didn't just listen. They were eager to stand beside me. These were people who had no loyalty to him, only to justice, and they became part of the foundation I was building. While I moved quietly, Michael paraded Claire openly. Photos of their dinners, their trips, their new love appeared online, and whispers about his fresh start spread through circles we once shared. He looked so sure of himself, so smug in the belief that he had won. I let him believe it, even as I tightened every thread of the case against him. Each piece of evidence, every ally gained, became fuel. He thought I was broken, invisible, irrelevant. What he didn't know was that every careless step he flaunted pushed me closer to the moment I would turn it all back on him. I waited for the right moment, and it came sooner than I expected. Another gathering. Another chance for them to play the perfect family while pretending I didn't exist. But this time, I walked in not as the humiliated wife they had cornered, but as someone ready to strip away every lie. My hands didn't tremble. My voice was steady. I had come prepared. The room quieted when I entered. Michael's smirk faltered, Claire shifted uncomfortably, and Ryan's eyes narrowed, already suspicious. I greeted his parents with polite warmth, then turned toward the two brothers. I laid a folder on the table and slid out the first stack of papers, records of transfers, dates, and signatures. I spoke clearly, explaining how money had been shifted away and how the affair lined up perfectly with those transactions. Michael laughed dismissively, trying to wave it all away. "She's making up stories," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. I pulled out the next set. Proof of the condo purchase, the timing, the documents bearing his name. The color drained from Claire's face. His parents leaned closer, their expressions tightening. Ryan tried to interrupt, but his own arrogance betrayed him. In his rush to defend Michael, he let slip a detail about the transfers, something I hadn't said aloud. The room froze. His parents turned sharply toward him, their disbelief plain. That one careless sentence was enough to unravel the illusion they had tried to maintain. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael sputtered, searching for excuses, but the damage was done. His parents looked at their sons not with pride, but with disgust. The shift in the room was unmistakable, authority once on their side now slipping away. I stood straighter, gathering the papers back into the folder. My voice was calm, even gentle, but it carried more weight than their shouting ever could. "You thought I'd stay silent," I told Michael, my eyes holding his. "You underestimated me." The truth was out. I didn't need to raise my voice or beg them to believe me. The evidence, Ryan's slip, and their own horrified faces said everything. For the first time, I walked away from one of their gatherings with my head high, leaving them to choke on the mess they had created. Daniel moved quickly once he had everything in hand. Motions were filed, petitions drafted, every line of the coerced agreement dissected. What I had signed under pressure was now under a harsh light, and the court began to see it for what it truly was, a trap. Alongside that, claims were placed to secure the property and accounts that Michael and Ryan had thought were safely hidden. The ripple effect started almost immediately. Whispers spread through Michael's professional circles, and the polished image he had crafted began to unravel. Colleagues who once praised him now avoided his calls. Potential deals froze, partnerships dissolved, and invitations that used to flood in vanished. The man who had always strutted with confidence suddenly looked cornered. Claire wasn't blind to the shift. I watched from a distance as her presence by his side grew less consistent. The lavish outings dwindled, the photos stopped, and soon her absence was louder than her company had ever been. Without the financial security he had promised her, she began to slip away, leaving him to fend for himself in the wreckage he created. Ryan fared no better. His careless slip during the confrontation had tied him to everything, and the fallout hit him just as hard. Associates who once tolerated him now treated him like a liability. He scrambled to explain, to separate himself from Michael, but his fingerprints were on too many documents, too many transactions. Watching him stumble was a bitter reminder that arrogance often leads to its own destruction. For me, the wounds were still raw. Betrayal leaves scars, and I carried them every day. But with each legal victory, each piece of ground regained, I felt justice drawing closer. It wasn't about revenge alone. It was about reclaiming the dignity and security they had tried to strip from me. As their world cracked, I finally felt my own beginning to steady. It wasn't triumph yet, but it was movement in the right direction, a step toward balance I thought I'd lost forever. The day in court felt like the closing of a long, brutal chapter. I sat at the table beside Daniel, my pulse steady as the judge reviewed the evidence. Each piece told the story clearly. The pressure at the party, the concealed transfers, the property tucked away in secret. The ruling came down firm and undeniable. The signature I had been forced into held no weight. The so-called agreement was struck down. From there, everything began to shift in my favor. Accounts that had been funneled away were brought back into reach. The property that Michael thought he had buried under false pretenses was reclaimed. Piece by piece, the life they tried to strip from me was restored. It wasn't about greed, it was about justice, about reclaiming what was mine after they had tried to erase me entirely. The exposure cut deeper than any judgment. News of their schemes didn't stay confined to the courtroom. Word spread through business circles, through family acquaintances, through every connection they had leaned on for respectability. Michael, once admired for his success, became a cautionary tale of deceit. Ryan, tied to every step of the plot, was dragged down with him. Their carefully constructed reputations collapsed in front of everyone who once praised them. Claire didn't linger long in the ruins. The moment it became clear that the money and the status were gone, so was she. Whatever promises Michael had whispered to her unraveled with his downfall. Watching her vanish was almost anticlimactic, as if she had only been waiting for the moment to slip out. I didn't need to chase him further, didn't need to twist the knife. The sight of him stripped of wealth, of influence, of the adoration he craved was more powerful than anything I could have orchestrated. For years, he believed he was untouchable, and now he stood exposed, abandoned, and humiliated. As I walked out of the courthouse, sunlight hitting my face, I felt no desire to look back at him. His destruction was complete, and I didn't need to add to it. Watching him crumble under the weight of his own choices was enough. I signed the papers on the new place with my hands steady for the first time in months. The keys felt like more than metal. They were a quiet promise I had carved out for myself. Rachel was there when I walked through the door, laughing, crying, carrying a ridiculous plant she insisted would make the living room feel less like an empty echo. We toasted with cheap takeout and sat on mismatched pillows, and for the first evening since everything fell apart, I slept without waking to panic. Moving in wasn't a celebration of spite. It was a declaration. I arranged the rooms on my terms, unpacking small things that reminded me who I had been before the lies and who I wanted to be next. At night I would stand at the window and listen to the hum of the street, thinking about everything I had lost and everything I had refused to let define me. Pain lived in the corners of those memories, but so did a stubborn pulse of resilience I hadn't known I'd kept. Friends called. Some offered help, others steady company. Rachel stayed late more than once, helping me hang pictures and refusing to let me second-guess myself. Her presence was a mirror, reminding me I was not a mistake or a cautionary tale, but a person who could rebuild. Word of the court's outcome spread quietly. Michael and Ryan retreated from family events, their absence a strange relief. Their parents' disappointment was a slow, private thing that I watched from a distance. It was not vengeance I sought but closure. They were left to reckon with the fallout of choices they had made. I no longer measured myself by the life they tried to erase. I measured by the small freedoms I'd reclaimed. The late breakfasts, the quiet nights, the control over my own future. They thought the party would be my ending. But it was just the beginning of my revenge. Do you think I made the right decision by fighting back and walking away? Or should I have handled it differently? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like mine.